he wins. Donald Trump, the provocateur, the showman, may not win this election. So I'm looking for President Trump to show up in the last 80 days to define what he will do for our country. That's what I would focus on. Policy. Yeah. Policy is the key to the White House.
I mean, I read a so-called Republican who Ronald Reagan didn't like, by the way, and she didn't like him, but she got credit for being this Reagan speechwriter, highly overrated. I don't know anything about her. I don't know her. Treats me badly, but that's okay. She called it wrong. She's called it wrong now for about 8 years. But she said one thing that got me. She said Kamala has one big advantage. She's a very beautiful woman. She's a beautiful woman. So I decided to go back and reread the clause. I'm not saying he's, but I say that I am much better looking than her. I think I'm much better looking. Much better. I'm a better looking person than Kamala. No, I couldn't believe it. She said, you know, I had never heard that one. They said, no, her biggest advantage is that she's a beautiful woman. I'm going, huh. I never thought of that. I'm better looking than she is.
He's referencing Pulitzer Prize winning columnist for the Wall Street Journal, Peggy Noonan, who anyone who's ever been involved in politics certainly knows Peggy Noonan, as I'm sure Donald Trump does as well. Let's bring in right now NBC News, MSNBC political analyst, former U.S. Senator Claire McCaskill, also former MSNBC host and contributor to Washington Monthly, Chris Matthews, and the co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, former senior advisor and chief spokesperson to Vice President Kamala Harris, Simone Sanders Townsend, Jonathan Lemire, with us still as well. And Claire, Republicans are all saying the same thing. Donald Trump needs to talk about the issues, to which Donald Trump will mock them and say, I am who I am. He's now in the Popeye defense, and that's what he's always done. I am who I am. This worked for me before. This is going to work for me again. I don't need to listen to people like Karl Rove or Peggy Noonan or other people who have been conservative and Republicans their entire life.
Yeah, it's worked so well for him before. He's never won the popular vote. And by the way, it's going to get worse before it gets better, because he goes there when he's under the most pressure and the most stress. And he can say all he wants, that she's easy to beat and this is under control and he's ahead by a bunch. He knows the crowds are showing up for her and not him. He knows that she's winning in the battleground states. And the other thing, Joe, I got to point out here, these guys that keep saying his policies are going to win for him. I got to tell you, that's not a walk in the park either, because what are his policies? Dobbs? Taking away the freedoms that women have enjoyed for 50 years in this country? Or what, is it tariffs that are going to drive up cost of goods for everybody in America? Or maybe it's loving up on Putin and Orban and all the autocrats around the world? I don't see that his policies are some big lifeline for him either.
Well, you know, Claire, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is one of the great misperceptions. Everybody has this pre-COVID, this dream of times before COVID, like it was some idyllic childhood. I want to start by what even people in the media still stumble around, and it's always been a pet peeve, and it was a pet peeve even when Donald Trump was president. They were saying, of course, even somebody in the media would go, of course, his economy is the best, but actually it just wasn't. If you look at economic growth, he ranked 7th among post-war presidents. He was behind Jimmy Carter. in economic growth. So that's not the case. You talk about tariffs. The Wall Street Journal editorial page, a very conservative editorial page, says Donald Trump's tariffs amount to the largest tax increase that anybody's talked about during this campaign cycle. He terminated Roe. Those are his words, not ours. Donald Trump's very, very proud of the fact that he terminated Roe when 70% of Americans consistently said they didn't want Roe to be terminated. You look at crime, violent crime numbers right now, lower than they were when Donald Trump left office. You look at illegal border crossings across the southern border. Right now, they are lower than when Donald Trump left office. And one final thing, they were at a 50-year low when Barack Obama handed the presidency over to Donald Trump. And then they skyrocketed. So all of this talk about the glory days, it's straight out of a Bruce Springsteen song. I don't think those glory days were quite so great when you actually look at the facts instead of what Donald Trump's trying to tell you.
Yeah, and the shortcut for all the Republicans that are embarrassed of Donald Trump, they don't like him, they wish he wasn't their nominee, the only refuge they have, the only place they can hide is say, well, his policies, his policies. And in fact, a lot of his policies they don't even agree with. But that's the only thing they've got to hide behind.
And we should note that Donald Trump at his rally over the weekend in Pennsylvania suggested that tariffs would be a tax not on Americans, but rather foreign countries, which a lot of economists have suggested, well, you don't really know how tariffs work, do you? So that's the centerpiece of his economic policy. And speaking of Pennsylvania, we should note that while Trump had that rally, Vice President Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz, had a bus tour in western Pennsylvania yesterday, an area of strength for Trump in the past. And they made the requisite stops at both Primanti's and Sheetz. Chris, you're an eastern Pennsylvania kind of guy, and you have a new piece for the Philadelphia Inquirer, which has this title. The Philly debate gives Harris a chance to tell Trump directly, say it to my face. And in it, you write in part this. Having watched Harris perform of late, I believe she can more than hold her own against the former president. The big question is whether Trump can pull the same shenanigans he did against Hillary Clinton. 8 years ago, as many of us cannot forget, he walked across the stage and stood directly behind the former First Lady and Secretary of State as she was taking her time to speak. I have often wondered what Clinton was supposed to do in such moments. Should she have turned on him and ridiculed him as a rule breaker or out-of-control predator? Today, we have an answer. It comes from Kamala Harris herself. Say it to my face is a retort as aggressive as Trump only tries to be. It's how you address a monster. Harris has the ability to point across the debate stage at Trump and tell it to his face. And Chris, certainly the vice president has a major stage this week in Chicago at the DNC. But then next, looming over the horizon, is that debate in Philadelphia you write about. Tell us more as to how she should approach both events.
Well, there's a great line in the first pages of Presumed Innocent by Scott Turow, that great movie it became, and TV series. But he says, when you're the prosecuting attorney, you should point at the defendant, in this case, a murder case, and point at him in the courtroom and say, you are accused of doing this, and then presenting the evidence. I think she can do that. I think debates are about guts as well as preparation. I think she has the physical ability, the historic ability of what she's doing here. See, Trump looks like an idiot when he talks about being a Miss America contestant, or he's better looking than her. He's not the Godzilla that he presented himself as with Hillary. He's not lurking behind her in sort of a creepy way. He's out there bragging about his appearance. That's not a scary guy. That's a vaudeville act. That's a joke. And so I think she can point to him with that command authority that she had when she announced her candidacy for president. I think she can be strong in the room. You know, when Nixon lost to Kennedy, I've been watching those tapes. They're all available. Go look at the tapes. Kennedy came on with 8 minutes of aggressive argument about the Cold War and saying what we fight about here in America is important in the fight against the Russians. And he was able to show strength. And Nixon had to play defense that whole time. It was like Nixon was trying to get Kennedy to like him. This time around, Trump cannot pull this Miss America number and say, I'm better looking than her. He can't play Godzilla again. He's going to have to stand there and take it because she's going to be aggressive. And this week is such a great photo play of history. You'll have Joe Biden giving a very, I think, poignant speech tonight. You're going to have a reference to Jimmy Carter with his grandson, Jason, speaking about him, approaching 100. And you're going to have Barack Obama and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton all out there as history, living history, alive, talking about what they did in the past. And then out comes Tim Walz and her. And I think, my God, she's going to be so young, so refreshing, so new, that she's going to look like the person to beat. And I think it's going to be a wonderful week. It'll be outside the debates. They're going to be, of course, the rallying and the protests and all. But I think she's going to show youth and tomorrow, and Trump's going to look like an old act.
It's going to be absolutely fascinating to see how it goes. Simone, let me ask you what Harris, Walz, what the team has to do over the next 4 days to continue the momentum that they've seen over the past month. Obviously, we're within 3 months. I mean, without a lot of mistakes, they can keep building and building that momentum. And so the question is, how do they build it through this week? What would you suggest they do?
Well, look, Joe, I think the program that has been put together that we know of thus far, and I've been talking to folks since I got here yesterday, is one that is going to show the depth and breadth of the Democratic Party apparatus, but also it's going to highlight Vice President Harris's strengths. I think you're going to see a lot of coach walls, right, endearing folks to them. While we here, sitting here, know a lot about Vice President Harris and, at this point, Governor Tim Walz, the American people don't necessarily. Melissa Murray and I have been talking to black women across the country, and we spoke to some black women just a couple days ago, young millennial black women, 2 from North Carolina, who said, and they're referring to this as the switch, by the way, Joe. That's how the young people are talking about the change of the ticket. And they both said, you know, since the switch, this is historic. It's good to see her, but we don't know much about her. So even though the vice president and Governor Walz have been on this tour, introducing themselves to the American people, running these ads, this is the largest stage that they will have prior to Election Day. And frankly, actually, I should correct myself, prior to people start voting. While Election Day is less than 80 days away, if you will, people start voting in about 28 days as we speak. In Pennsylvania, right. September 6th, the polls open. So introducing themselves this stage, people who know them, coming out, talking about who they are, what they believe, and what they will do is going to be very, very important. Just as important, I would argue, as those policy proposals. You know, Donald Trump likes to act tough. He likes to talk tough. But Vice President Harris on this campaign trail is proving that she actually is tough, has the strength, and I believe you're going to see that reflected throughout the week. This theme, the For the People theme, Vice President Harris spent a large chunk of her career as a prosecutor, and I used to always hear her say, she would stand up when she got in the courtroom and say, Kamala Harris, for the people. So that is a hearkening back to not just her first presidential campaign, but the origins of her public service in this country.
For the people. I was just going to ask, what's the message this week? What do you put on the bumper sticker? For the people is a good start. Claire, what's the message this week that you can put on a bumper sticker for Democrats?
Oh, I think we won't go back. I think there is, you know, our party went through a convulsive, difficult, horrendous 3 weeks where a man we loved and revered and respected, who had done an amazing job as president, confronted the reality of polling data and the fact that there was really a kind of in many ways, an erosion of his support. And really, everybody really was